Hey, what's up? Andrew Kramer here for VideoCopilot.net, and welcome to a very exciting After Effects tutorial that's actually just an overview for a project file we're giving away. So, didn't mean to mislead you there, but the beginning, that's pre-recorded, so just kind of reuse that. Actually, we're creating this graphic based on the trailer for Tron Legacy. So, let's take a look. Now, I didn't want to do a whole tutorial because I figured people can just kind of poke through the project file, but I wanted to explain some of the elements in the project file so it made a little bit more sense. So what's interesting about this title is the extrusion has this cool kind of grid, and I thought, how would you create that in After Effects? So just playing around with some different things, there's some interesting techniques for duplicating layers to create volume. And so a combination of things came together. And so I thought I would just show you that solution. So here we have some high-tech electronic equipment. This is called a VCR. I think it stands for video cassette recorder. So you're going to be hearing about this really soon. High definition VCRs. Anyway, so what's going on here is we have 3 pre-comps, one for each of the letters. So if we double click on one, you can see we have a whole bunch of letters stacked up in 3D space. And if we look at a custom view, it looks something like that. Now, the reason they're individual is so that they can animate in one at a time and sort of have their own effect. So if we look at the final render, you can see the characters come in various ways and just makes it a little bit more interesting. Now, what we have to do to set this up is create a new comp, and we'll hit OK, and then we'll take the text tool and we'll just click in here. There we go, and we'll scale up a letter. So we'll start one letter at a time, scale it up a bit. Now, the interesting thing about this is that we're not actually using a filled letter. We're actually using a stroke or an outline of the letter. So what we need to do is take the A and turn off the fill color. So we could do that by clicking on this no fill. And so then that automatically turns it into a stroke. So now we have a white stroke. Now we can set this down. We can kind of scale this up. We'll set it to about 4. And then I'm going to duplicate it. And what we need to do is create 2 separate outlines. So one outline has to be inside of another outline. And we'll take this bottom layer and we'll set the stroke to 5. So it's a little bit thicker than the stroke on top. And then if we set the track matte to alpha inverted, what it does is creates sort of a subtraction of this top layer, and then we're left with only the small outline that goes beyond. Now, this is useful because when I duplicate the layer again, Control D, I can make the stroke say 2, and it'll actually be inside of the group. So it's just a way to set it up so that you can have a thinner stroke outlining another stroke. And yeah, so not necessarily the easiest thing to do, but we got it done. Thank goodness. So next thing I want to do is pre-compose the 3 layers. So we'll select them. We'll choose Layer, Pre-compose, and we'll call this A, and we'll call it OK. So that's pretty good, but then we need to take this comp, this A comp, put it inside of a folder called A comps. So this will be the front of our 3D text, but we also need to create these thin lines that run down the side of the extruded text. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this A comp, drop it into a new comp, and we're going to call this A lines. And we'll open that up. And what I need to do is create an adjustment layer. So we'll choose Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. And we'll come over here to the effects, and we're going to type in Vegas. And we'll drop this on the adjustment layer. And what this is going to allow us to do is create some dots around the outlines of this text. So we'll come over here. We'll set the rendering to transparent. So that's what we want. We'll also set the dots to be white. Now, they're a little bit long, so we can control the length here. And then we also may want to turn up the segments so that there's enough of them to sort of fill this effect. And then we can also probably turn up the size. So something like this. And because it's a pre-comp, we can come back to it and make some adjustments in a little bit. So we'll go ahead, we'll come back over here to our main project. And here we have the A comp and we have the A lines comp. So let's take both of those comps, hold down Shift, drop it into a new comp. And it'll be a single comp, and we'll hit OK. And we'll shut off the A comp for a moment. Then I'm going to create a new adjustment layer. And then we're going to choose Effect, Expression Control, Slider Control. And this is going to create our extrusion. And it's basically a simple way to push these layers in Z space. So we'll hit F4, make them 3D layers, and then we'll take the A lines, hit P, and we're going to make a quick expression. So let's take this adjustment layer, hit E, and bring that effect slider up. And then in the position for the A lines, we'll Alt-click on it, and we're going to type value plus begin bracket 0, 0, comma index star or index times the extrusion slider. And then we'll add an end bracket. So what that's saying is take the current value and add 0 to the X, 0 to the Y, and then multiply the index number or the layer number, number 3, times the control layer. So if we set the control to say 5, and if we duplicate this layer about 10 times, Control D, 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 what that's going to do is push the layers into Z space and essentially create a bit of an extrusion. So we can take the control layer, we can increase this number, and it just makes it easy to duplicate the layers. Now be careful because you don't want them to get too separated. We want to be able to see a solid line more or less. So then if we turn the front layer on, maybe move that into position. We can even duplicate it, put one at the very back, and then lower the opacity just so it seems to have a little bit of volume. Now, the other thing I may want to do is go into the A line comp and maybe mask out some of this. An easy way to do that might be just to take the layer and hit M and set subtract. So I've just created a mask and then I've subtracted the result of that area. So just because we don't want it to get too bulky. So we have this A comp. Now it's called A2. We should probably call it A3D and hit OK. There you go. All right, so now that we have the A3D, we can bring it out into our comp, hit F4, and turn on the collapse transformation switch, and then make the layer 3D. So what that does is almost creates like a 3D object inside of my main comp, and then if I create a camera, I can then maybe start animating this. So now there's this really cool script called the True AE Comp Duplicator, and what it allows you to do is select a comp and duplicate it, and it will duplicate all of the dependencies. Maybe add an adjustment layer to do some colorization, so maybe a tint effect, tint this like a blue color, and then maybe add a glow. And frankly, that's the gist of it. No, actually there's 2 more steps. You just have to add a whole bunch of optical flares and then you're done. So in the actual comp, we've got some interesting sort of flares that kind of pop up and move around in the design. By the way, if you want to turn on the motion blur, do it inside the X3D comp. So if we select all the layers, turn on the motion blur in the A3D, that will allow the motion blur to be on inside of your main comp. So if we did like a quick, I don't know, animation with the camera here, and we turn on the motion blur, it'll actually work as long as they're turned on inside of the pre-comp there. So this looks amazing. So anyway, if this were a real tutorial, I might even add, some more things and make it look worse. But since we're just kind of going over the project file, I'll just keep it at that. So feel free to kind of play around, go through some of the different layers and things. You might even notice I did it slightly different initially, and then I realized that I could simplify it a little bit, and that's what I showed you was the easier way to do it. So check out the Tron template, and you can kind of see the composite of this VCR thing and how each of them stacks up. Hopefully this has been useful, and hopefully you can think about how to use this for something else, because I saw the Tron movie and I'm not so sure they're going to be making a sequel. And hopefully you can use some of these tricks to create some of your own unique texts. I'm sure that Vegas effect and even some of those stroke effects could be really useful. So anyway, hey, I'm Andrew Kramer, and we'll see you next time. And I might even make a good tutorial. Maybe. Nah.